With Trajan Langdon now in charge, could the Pistons draft philosophy change? And who could someone like Langdon look to target in the upcoming draft? We'll talk about that in just a moment.
Lane, skies a jam. Dynamite dunk and the crowd loves it.
Back to Pistons Intellect. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_3on3. You can also follow us over on Instagram at Pistons_Intellect. And as always, if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. For today's show, as I mentioned off the top, we're going to have a look at Trajan Langdon's draft history with the Pelicans and how that could potentially affect the Pistons' selection process in the upcoming draft. But before we get to that, I just want to quickly touch on the Monty Williams situation in Detroit. We haven't heard anything officially from the Pistons or haven't seen a whole heap kind of reported from a national perspective on Monty Williams' position with the franchise going forward. About a week ago, just after the Langdon news report dropped that the Pistons were going to hire him, James Edwards III detailed in an article that Tom Gores is more than willing to pay out the remainder of Monty Williams' $60 million contract if Langdon decides that he wants to find a new coach, or whoever the GM Langdon hires wants to find a new coach. So we haven't really had anything too official since then, but a good friends over at Pistons Talk, Anthony, did his weekly podcast yesterday, and I tuned in, watched a little bit of it, and he had James Edwards on as a guest. And the part I watched, and I'll put a link in the description for you to go over. I'm sure you all follow and subscribe Pistons Talk anyway, but James kind of said he puts a 50-50 chance on Monty being the coach next season as of today or yesterday. So I guess that's nothing overly kind of news breaking, I feel like, but I wanted to bring it up because it's, I guess, on Friday, obviously Troy Weaver was let go or parted ways. And immediately after Weaver was, the news broke that Weaver had parted ways with the Pistons and was departing the franchise. Not long after that, the Pistons officially announced Langdon as the president of basketball operations. Now, some of that, I believe, is just kind of from a PR point of view. The Pistons probably, they obviously, I mean, I believe we've read something that Tom Gores felt bad about having to let go of Weaver. So there was some sympathy behind Weaver's dismissal, and it feels like the organization with Weaver on the way out, they kind of, part of Langdon's announcement coming so quickly after the departure of Weaver is to kind of suppress that news of Weaver and, turn all the attention to Langdon and have more of a positive spin for the news cycle for the Pistons. But there's part of me that wonders if Monty was to be gone, would he already have been let go, fired, whatever you want to call it, at the same time as Troy, and then you're bringing Langdon as a fresh slate? Because I dare say Langdon probably didn't want Weaver around. He certainly didn't want him as the GM, and obviously there was a report that the Pistons offered Troy an offsite scouting role, which he declined. So part of me thinks, so if Langdon's already kind of been a part of the decision to let Weaver go, then, I'm sure they've had a conversation about Monty. Maybe they haven't, but I'm sure they have. So if the decision on Weaver was made, then part of me feels like if Monty was to be gone, he would have been gone as well, at a similar time as Troy, or at least before Langdon was announced. So it's just something to consider. And I guess that's kind of the 50-50 split of all of this. So, I've said since the season finished, I think I even said during the season, like, obviously, and fair enough and rightfully so, a large portion of the fan base wanted Troy gone. I mean, Monty Williams gone. I was always in the camp of front office needs to be refreshed. Not saying you need to fire everyone, but I think it was time for Troy to go. The roster needed a fresh set of eyes and a fresh kind of perspective on things. But I always kind of said with Monty, I wouldn't be surprised to see him back next season, and it probably wouldn't be, a deal breaker for me as a fan, I guess. And if I look at the organization, I think the front office was clearly the area that needed the biggest shakeup. It was the area that hadn't had much turnover in recent years. So to see change there is great. And then look, if they want to find a new coach, I'm all for it. But I'm okay with giving Monty another year. As bad as last year was, I refuse to believe he's that bad of a coach. Maybe he is. I'm sure a lot of you in the comments are going to roast me or just disagree with me. But yeah, just a minor update on that. I think it's just obviously worth keeping an eye on, and I think it's an announcement a lot of fans are waiting for each day, especially now with Troy going. It feels like what's going to happen with Monty is kind of the big item right now amongst the Pistons community. So I just wanted to bring a slight update there and shout out to Pistons Talk. Anthony does great work over there. So if for some reason you aren't, go follow them on Instagram, Twitter, every social media channel. They have something. So yeah, go check them out. Now, the main piece of today, I wanted to get into how Trajan Langdon's, I guess, draft philosophy and draft history with the Pelicans could affect the Pistons in the upcoming draft. And got this idea off the back of, once again, our good friend James Edwards III. He put an article out today kind of going through the history of Langdon's draft picks with the Pelicans and noted some names he could see the Pistons being interested in as a result. So I think first up, I'll go through who Langdon drafted or who the Pelicans selected while Langdon was in the front office and then GM for the last 2 seasons. So he joined the Pelicans in 2019. Obviously, they had the first overall pick that year. They took Zion Williamson, but much like the Cade Cunningham draft, it's one of those ones where you get lucky, you get the number 1 pick, and I'm pretty sure Zion was a consensus number 1 overall pick. And Cade was pretty close to that as well. So, props for making the right choice there, but it's a pretty easy pick. So moving on, in 2020, the Pelicans take Kara Lewis, who was a kind of a quick point guard out of Alabama, I believe. I remember I kind of liked him for the Pistons back in the day. He hasn't eventuated too much, but he was the first pick. I think he was like pick, I'm just guessing here. I know he was lottery. I think it was like pick 11, 12. And then following year, absolute home run draft for the Pelicans. And I believe this is when Langdon was the GM. He became GM this summer. They draft Trey Murphy, the third, in the first round, and then Herb Jones in the second round. So 2 lengthy, rangy wings. Murphy, obviously coming out of Virginia, was a known shooter and a decent athlete. I think he was like a sophomore coming out of Virginia, but we've seen what he's turned into today. Like, you just have to go back and look at his season with the Pelicans and how important he is, and just kind of the range he has as a shooter is crazy. And then, he's turned himself into, or not turned himself into, but I know I certainly was, and I think a lot of the NBA community weren't aware of how good of an athlete he is. And that obviously translates on offense with high-flying dunks, but down the defensive end as well, he's just got so many tools there. And much like Murphy, so does Herb Jones, more known for his defense. But, I think he was all defensive second team this year. And, his shooting comes and goes. I think he closed the season better this year. But yeah, just 2 wings that I've said this before, like these are 2 wings that the Pistons would move mountains to get. Like, they just had one of those guys on their roster. I know they have Asar Thompson, but he's a bit of a different mold to these 2. These 2 are your typical like 3-and-D wings that are going to make a lot of money in the NBA if they can stay healthy. Then in 2022, Dyson Daniels, a bigger guard, 6'6", proud Aussie, who's about 6'7", played for the G League Ignite. He struggles to shoot the ball, obviously, but really good on-ball defender, just a really good defender all round. Can kind of defend 1, 2, 3, really strong. It's kind of had, like, I wouldn't say he came into the league like Zion, nothing like that. That's crazy. But for a rookie, he's pretty solid. Battled some injury woes. The jumper has been a bit of an issue for him, and the Pelicans have kind of been. They're not a stacked team with like top tier talent, but they've just got a lot of depth, and he's struggled to kind of find a consistent role, I would say, over his first 2 to 3 seasons, or 2 seasons, I should say. But he's clearly a core piece for them, and once again, great playmaker, excellent defender, and then the rest of his game still needs work, but another really solid pick in I think he was around 8 or 9. And then last year they took Jordan Hawkins out of UConn. So excellent three-point shooter, movement shooter. Anything to do with shooting the ball is excellent. Defensively has a lot to work on. Some of that's to do with kind of the slender frame and the lack of weight. But there's kind of – and the other thing I just wanted to mention was Najee Marshall, who signed with the Pelicans in a two-way back in 2020. And he's been a bit of more of a long-term project, but you kind of saw last season and a little bit the season before, he's really turned himself into a decent rotational wing, who's probably a level below, or is a level below, like the Trey Murphys and Herb Jones of the world. But considering you got him as a two-way undrafted free agent, and now to sign him on a 3-year deal a couple of years ago, just another one of those kind of diamonds in the rough situations, at an important position on the floor. So the thing I kind of take away from this, height, length, and the defensive tools of Murphy, Herb Jones, Marshall, and Daniels, like all those players there, I would take any two of those in a heartbeat and put them on the Pistons. Like they all, like the ability for each of them to either they can all defend, but then it went on the offensive side, they either shoot, but if they can't shoot, someone like Daniels has like that ability to like dribble, pass, make some plays happen in transition, and just has that kind of IQ. And then you have like Najee Marshall, does a little bit of everything and has really improved in his 4th season last year. And it kind of that exact play type. Well, I guess Troy kind of, the Pistons did have a couple like that Dyson Daniels type was kind of what I guess Killian kind of was in that mold. Obviously not nowhere near that, but that was kind of the mold Killian. But in terms of like wings that can shoot and defend, Pistons don't have any of those and haven't. So they kind of got Fontecchio, but I just mean through the draft. That has not been something they prioritize at all. So I guess the closest you could say was Sadiq Bey, but we saw how that panned out. Defensively, just never really worked out, and then offensively, the shot was just way too inconsistent, too streaky. So it's kind of like the opposite of what Troy Weaver went for. Troy Weaver went for a lot of guards and a lot of centers and a lot of big men. So when we come and look at this draft and the types of players that Langdon, based off his previous draft picks, could look to put at the top of his board, I'll just list the 3. James Edwards, the 3rd listed. 2 of them I spoke about in my previous episode, but and one of those 2 was Zachary Richichet, the French 6'8" wing. I spoke about him at length on my Friday episode, so go back and have a look at that. But look, 6'8" wing that can shoot, showed promise defensively, particularly off ball. On the ball has potential, but he's quite slight in his frame, so that's going to be an area of improvement. Limitations for him are kind of just like shot creation, that kind of thing. But if the 3-point shot is real, like, and that can translate in his rookie season, like that's a pretty valuable player. Like I think, unfortunately, the Pistons at number 5 probably aren't going to get a chance to take Richichet. It feels like I've seen him constantly in the top 2, and it looks like the Hawks or Wizards, whichever one. It feels like Sarr and Richichet are going to be 1 and 2. So, but you never know. He could slip to the Pistons. And I feel like I said last episode, he's number 1 on my board. James Edwards III said in his piece here, he it wasn't reporting, but he thought that a player like Ricochet and Ricochet himself would be number one on Langdon's board. So, yeah, no surprise there. 6'8" wing, shoot the ball, defensive potential. Kind of sounds like some of the guys we've just spoken about in the Pelicans. Then the other player, another wing, was Cody Williams out of Colorado. Really interesting prospect, a player I haven't done a huge deep dive on. He wasn't mentioned in my last video on like the sort of top 5 prospects I had for the Pistons. But when you look at his measurables, he's 6'6", 7'1" wingspan, like just a huge plus wingspan there. He's kind of, I think he was a freshman. He had some injury issues. I've seen some compare him to kind of like a Jaden McDaniels with the Timberwolves as kind of like that would be the optimal outcome. And if I remember going back and watching McDaniels, so he was in that 2020 draft as well. And he was kind of highly recruited out of high school, went to Washington. And when he was in Washington, like the stuff I was looking at, like he was almost trying to be that shot creating number one scoring option wing at Washington, and it just didn't work out at all. And as part of the reason he kind of dropped, I think, into the 20s, obviously the Timberwolves, and he's really carved out a niche as one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Similar measurables to Cody Williams, similar as well. Like, well, I'm not sure this is similar, but Cody Williams shot 41% from 3, extremely low volume though. So can he shoot is going to be the huge swing factor for him. Because if you're the Pistons and you draft him, you believe in the shot, because there's no way you're taking him if you don't think that shot's going to be, a threat in the first few seasons, because there's just already too much non-shooting. Unless you're thinking of moving on from some of the other young core and the players looking to build around, then that would make some sense. But look, he's the younger brother of Jalen Williams, with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, he's going to get compared to him a fair bit, even though it doesn't feel like he's anywhere near the prospect. They're brothers, same DNA, so you never know. But yeah, once again, long, rangy wing, potentially could shoot, defensive potential's there. Big question mark for him, similar to Ricochet, is the ability to create off the bounce. But when you play alongside Cade Cunningham, when you might play alongside Jaden Ivey, or if the Pistons make a trade for someone like Brandon Ingram, you're not going to be asked to do a lot. So that's not a major concern for me. Now, the third player James mentioned was Matas Buzelis. Spoke a bit about him in the most previous episode. 6'10". I think he's like a pure 4 or forward, but he's a 4-man, maybe a backup, small ball 5 once he fills out. But the shot, it looks good. It just doesn't go in. He shot like 28% or 27% in the G League. Like I said, it looks really good, but for some reason, the 3-point shot shot around, like I said, 27%. And then from the free throw line, it was like 67%. So I wouldn't be as concerned with the 3-point shooting if the free throw percentage was higher, but, it is concerning. Now, he shot well in high school. And if the shot does work out for him, there's a reason he was kind of number one heading into this 2024 draft cycle, because he's an excellent weak side rim protector, excellent off-ball defender. He averaged 2 blocks a game, can do a little bit off the bounce. He kind of would be the perfect 4-man if he could shoot alongside Durant and alongside kind of Cade Cunningham. Like, there's a lot to like there on both sides of the ball, fit-wise and potential-wise. But if the 3-point shot isn't there, he's just a very weird fit for the Pistons, and obviously it impacts his potential in the NBA. So those were the guys James mentioned, and it kind of makes sense. Like I've said, they have all those kind of, they're tall, lengthy, defensive potentials there. There's just a lot of questions about the jumper. Apart from Ricochet's proved it a bit more, but yeah. I would be kind of like, Ricochet is my number 1 guy. Matas was number 5 on my board. And then Cody Williams, like I said, didn't have on my board. So let me know what you think of those 3 players. I've seen a lot of Pistons fans talk about Cody Williams, so I'd be especially keen on those who are high on him, just to give me a bit more information. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. Now, finally, before we get out of here, I just wanted to go through some of the potential candidates for the GM position, which is obviously vacant. So once again, James Edwards III, my man. Support James. Always support James and his stuff for The Athletic. He gives us so much good insight. So he dropped this article pretty much immediately after the Troy news last week. And I'm just going to list some of the names here and with a very brief bio on each. There is one guy in here, one person in here who's been listed as the favorite, but we still haven't heard anything since Friday. So first kind of potential candidate for the GM position is Travis Schlenk. He's currently with the Wizards. He was the GM of the Hawks from 2017 to 2022, kind of helped build that team. They drafted Trae Young. They got to that Eastern Conference Finals appearance. He made the trade for Clint Capella. I think he drafted John Collins, drafted DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, that sort of Hawks team. So had some success there building a team. Obviously, nothing sustained, and he's left there in 2022. And like I said, it's with the Wizards. The next candidate is Matt Lloyd, who is currently the Senior Vice President of Basketball Ops for the Timberwolves. Extensive history in the NBA, highly respected guy. Been with the Wolves. Don't actually have the years here, but yeah, just a candidate. I don't know much about him, but go read James's article. There's a lot more information on these guys here. Michael Blackstone, so currently executive with the Pelicans, and he was noted as the favorite to land a job in the Pistons front office. I believe there was a report from Shams as well. So it feels like he's going to be with the Pistons front office no matter what. It's just just depends on what role. Is he going to be the GM? Is he just going to be a decision maker alongside Langdon? That remains to be seen, but it feels like he's going to be a part of the organization in some form. Next person called candidate was Brock Ola, who is currently the Vice President of Basketball and Strategic Planning with the Knicks. He's known as the Cap Guru, and so he's kind of an up-and-coming, I guess, front office staff member, and he's been with the Knicks, and it feels like for him to come to the GM role would be quite a step up for him. But Cap Guru feels like when we talk about what the Pistons have struggled with in the past 4 to 5 years under Weaver and that regime, a lot of it had to do with eating contracts, giving out some poor contracts, nothing egregious, but someone who knows the cap well and is known in the NBA community as the Cap Guru, I feel like could have been of some serious help in the past few years. So name to keep an eye on there. Then the last candidate, which I know Pistons fans are going to love, and that's Tayshaun Prince. What more do I need to say? I think anyone watching this knows about Tayshaun Prince and his success with the Pistons. Champion in 2004 and just one of the franchise's favorite sons. But since he left Detroit, he pretty much played for the Grizzlies. He played a tiny stint for the Timberwolves before he retired, but he's been an executive with the Grizzlies since 2017, and he's kind of worked his way up, and currently he is the Vice President of Basketball Affairs. So Prince coming back, I'm sure everyone would love that. Whether he's ready for the GM role, I have no idea, but he was a name listed in James's article, and I know Pistons fans all absolutely love Tayshaun Prince, so I had to mention him. So any of those names jump out to you? Honestly, I'm just reading them out to give you guys the latest news. I'm, like I said, front office stuff. I don't have intel, so all I can go off is the articles we get and kind of look at some of the history of these guys. I think for me, like Travis Schlenk of these guys seems to have the most experience, or the only experience as an actual GM. But you know, I wouldn't be opposed to having kind of a new, a fresh GM run the show, obviously under Langdon, who was a GM at the Pelicans. So it's not as if there's no one in the front office who hasn't been a GM. So getting necessarily someone in new, their first time as a GM, might not be a bad thing. So I don't have too much of a heavy opinion on this right now, but I'll be keen to hear your thoughts as always. But I think that's going to do it for today's show, guys. We'll be back on Thursday. I wonder if we're going to hear about Monty Williams. I wonder if we're going to hear anything about Monty and the Pistons coaching position. I feel like we're going to find out something this week because the draft is pretty much 3 weeks away. So maybe like we're getting close to the draft, and I feel like you want to have your coach set before the draft. So I feel like we're going to hear somewhat soon about what's going on with Monty Williams. So unless there's any breaking news on that or anything else, as always, go Pistons.